You're listening to Binder. I'm your host, Ray McManus. Well, all right. It's good to be back here in the studio. Hey, Drew, how you doing?
Oh, hey, Ray. Didn't see you there.
It's a big space here, y'all.
Yeah. When'd you come in?
I live here. I'm the writer in residence.
Oh,
so
that's the residence part.
Right.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You know, residence is actually really apropos for what we're going to talk about today.
It sure is.
So as astute listeners of the show have probably realized whenever you hear me and Ray together, that probably means we have a new exhibition opening.
And we do. And it's an exciting one, too. I love the exhibitions. I think CMA does such a fantastic job with that space in general. And we've seen some really good shows, especially in the last 3 to 4 years. There have been just some amazing ones. But Unsettled is one that I think is really, it is up there in the top 5 as far as I'm concerned. In its volume, in the directions that it takes us, the questions that it gets us to ask, and just the variety of just amazing art in that space.
Yeah, the full title is Unsettled, The Landscape in American Art. So you're initially going to think, okay, this is a show of landscape paintings, which is great.
Sure.
But in reality, it's more of a show about the landscape and not specifically just landscape paintings. So they're definitely there. There's plenty of examples of that. You see some beautiful Hudson River school paintings, as well as some more contemporary kind of representations of the American landscape. But they paired that with like a lot of pieces of like material culture and just objects that literally use the land as a material,
right.
Or use that as an inspiration for the artists themselves. So like some of it might be very literal, such as like Catawba pottery, where they are taking, clay from the land and using it to create these objects. So like, I mean, it looks at it from a lot of different angles. It also looks at it from a lot of different perspectives. I think historically, we've talked on the show a lot about the historical American perspective and kind of who wrote that. And this exhibition really takes a look at that and asks a lot of questions about it.
Yeah, I think, what I really love about it, I mean, I and our listeners know I've talked a lot about it, is just how much, how important landscape is to me as a poet, as a Southern poet. But, I think landscape, unfortunately, is for a lot of folks a two-dimensional experience, right?
Yeah.
There's a picture of the river and there's a landscape and here's some farmland and there's a landscape. But what this exhibition is doing is getting us to look at it in a much deeper context, thinking of layers of landscape, and really thinking about all of the different aspects that go into it. I think from an American historical perspective, we just see what's in front of us now. We see the new thing. We don't take into consideration by whose hands, on whose back. When you think of it in terms of art, with the Hudson Valley folks and stuff like that, where the perspective of landscape is typically from a male-dominated perspective, a white male-dominated perspective. So we're seeing, artists from various nationalities, and I think it gives you a much, a fuller appreciation and understanding of landscape by looking at so many different pieces of art. So it's not just painting, it's sculpture. The shack piece, and I'd like for us to talk a little bit about that perhaps, but, in which I love that idea of, finding something and repurposing it and making it into something much larger and gives us something to talk about. The other part of it is the whole idea of settled and unsettled. Because I think for, an American perspective, the idea of settling the land, settling the country, right? Taming that land and settling that space, and now it somehow is America, when in fact so much of really what is America is unsettled. And that's part of the beauty of that. And we especially see that here in the South. If I said to any Southerner, close your eyes and tell me one thing in the landscape, a Southern landscape that comes to your mind, the first thing, they might say the ocean, right? That's definitely unsettled. Kudzu, right? All of these various places where the natural world just grows and takes over. And those are the things that we love the most, because once we bulldoze that down and put up a strip mall and a Domino's pizza, it's settled. But, is that really, something that's indicative of our culture? Is that really something that indicates who we are?
I mean, I think that's what I love about this exhibition is it really brings these questions to light, Mm-hmm. And it's one thing, I think, when you hear someone talk about it, it's a different thing when you're like being confronted with it directly,
right?
Which is, I think, what this exhibition does best at its core is like when you see these pieces next to each other, you immediately understand what it's trying to tell you in terms of our relationship with identifying an American identity and an American culture and how the landscape plays a role in that. It is interesting because America's a big place. It's not everything isn't just one note. There's not just one type of culture that inhabits America. I mean, going to New York and being here feels like you could feel like you're in a completely different country to some people,
true.
In terms of like the culture, the way people talk, the way people act.
Mm-hmm.
And that's nothing against New York. I love New York. New Yorkers are fine. But we're just
New
different,
Jersey.
and that's okay, I want to give a lot of credit to the exhibition team that put this together because it was sort of a really unique process outside of how we do a lot of our exhibitions. So this was the culminated efforts of 4 different museums that all worked together to create this exhibition and some other micro exhibitions that we've been doing as part of this big partnership that's sponsored by the Art Bridges Foundation. And so they reached out to the Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art, which is in Connecticut, and asked them to kind of put together what they're calling a cohort of museums. And this cohort worked together to kind of create some new perspectives on American art. That was like really the big goal behind what they were doing. So the folks at the Wadsworth reached out to our museum, as well as the Mobile Museum of Art and Montgomery Museum of Art, both of which are in Alabama. And the 4 of us kind of banded together and all worked together as a large team to create this exhibition. So in a lot of ways, this exhibition had like 5 curators, which is really different from your standard kind of singular curatorial vision and then having a team that helps them kind of build that from the ground up. This had a lot of collaboration and cooperation that had to happen, which can be really challenging. And I think they did a really fantastic job of making it feel really cohesive, considering how many different pieces and parts had to go into making it.
Right.
And so, like, you'll see a few CMA collection pieces in the show, but you're also going to see a lot of great stuff from our partners at these other museums, as well as the Art Bridges Foundation that have donated a few pieces to kind of flesh things out. You mentioned the Buchanan shack piece earlier, which is like we're kind of using as like kind of the emblem for the show. It's like in a lot of the marketing images, and the title wall for the show has like kind of recreation of it. And it's not a landscape at all. It's a sculptural piece that essentially looks like a pink and blue shack. It's great for us personally here in Columbia because it's from our collection, but also it's of an artist who was originally from Orangeburg.
Mm-hmm.
I think what Buchanan's doing with that piece is really compelling. Not only does it work great as an emblem for the exhibition itself, but also it tells like a very Southern story, right? Like we all see these shacks driving around town, driving around Columbia, driving around Orangeburg, driving around any area in the South. You're going to see these like shacks on the side of the road. She's really looking at it from the perspective of this is something that has endured, right? It has lasted through wars. It has lasted through like changes in like political regime. It has lasted through changes in culture, and it's still standing today. And like in that regard, kind of, it has symbolic power to it, And so she's kind of reclaiming the image of these, shacks that would have probably been used as homes for folks that were impoverished or sharecroppers, and really trying to show us the beauty in what you can find in these little shacks you see on the side of the road. So I think that's a great example of how the show as a whole kind of looks at the American landscape and how it affects us directly.
I mean, I like that. I think I'm drawn to the simplicity of it. I mean, because it does all these things that you're saying. And literally it is a bunch of wood put together. I mean, which for many of the actual structures that do punctuate much of the rural landscape in America, and certainly a southern landscape, they have withstood that test of time and are very much a part of it. And I think, one of the things that helped me to put those spaces in perspective as a kid when I would see those things, and I would think, God, it must be terrible to live in something like that. And I think it was my dad maybe had made the comment that, no, what would have been terrible is sleeping on the ground, and, out in the open. And home is always what we've made it and what we've made it out of. So I do think, that small, simple piece, I think you're exactly right. I think that's why I think it's emblematic of this show, that what we are seeing are slivers of the American landscape, right? I mean, yeah, it is a big country. Apparently, unless you're Forrest Gump, you can't really run across it. But if you do, you're only going to see what you see out the windows of the train. You're only going to see what you see outside the car. You're only going to see the route you take. And it's the art that, really sort of blossoms out and allows us to see way beyond just our own individual vision.
I really wanted to say that I'm excited that you're here today to do this upcoming interview, because I really can't think of someone who understands like how art is impacted by its environment better than you. And considering your work and how directly tied it is to kind of where you come from and who you are, and like how that has like played a larger role. Yeah, I'm really excited to hear you talk with our guest today, who I will let you introduce because you know her better than I do. So who are we talking to today, Ray?
We're going to talk to Marlanda Dekine. Marlanda is a poet, lives down in Georgetown. She's connected with the Gullah Geechee culture, and has 2 books out, but her most recent book, Thresh and Hold, came out, I think, about a year ago. And what's fascinating about Marlanda, and we'll hear some more from her and hear some of her work, is just she too is a poet here in South Carolina who is very much writing about the environment that she is in and that she is from. And we have a kindred spirit, together, she and I. And so when we were thinking about trying to put together something for the opening for Unsettled, she was the first person I thought of, because, she does some work in the museums, does this really cool blend with music and poetry and movement. And so not only will folks be in for a real treat to be able to see that, but our listeners are going to be in for a real treat to get to hear from her. So yeah, let's get Marlanda in here.
My Black, rural, queer childhood. I want my body, but I don't want it to be called a body. Reminds me of when my family and I were driving through Manning, South Carolina. I was the first to see the big black sound, the buzzing in all our ears. I'd never heard of a horsefly. I just knew it was big. I screamed, and our big brown caravan stopped at a triangular median smack dab in the middle of a small downtown road. I screamed. The horsefly buzzed and smacked itself into the wide windows of blue sky. I don't remember. I can spot a single ant on a dark surface. Maybe I've been afraid to claim my body, afraid to be wild and break out into all this sky around me. Perhaps I can burst through ceilings and glass, explode into joy.
Hell yeah. Marlanda, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Ray.
That's awesome.
I'm doing well.
You look great.
Thank you.
Yeah, has summer been good so far?
It's been hot.
It's been hot. It sure is. I mean, oh, God, it seems like, when we bring, at the university, for whatever reason, we always bring writers down here in the fall.
Yeah.
And they're always like, man, it's so nice here. I could live here. And like, yeah, come see us in June, July, and August. You know?
Yeah, it's hot.
You're from South Carolina?
I am.
Yeah.
I was born in Fountain Inn, and then eventually, I think when I was around 6, we moved back to where my parents are from, Plantersville, South Carolina.
Right.
Right in Georgetown County.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you grew up out there?
Yeah,
Pretty rural?
Pretty rural, very rural.
Yeah.
Fields.
Oh, yeah. No, there's no shortages of fields.
Yeah.
And smells. No shortages of smells.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
So from that point, growing up in Georgetown, talk a little bit about how you found your way into being a poet.
Ooh. So my family is a church-going family, and I grew up going to mostly non-denominational churches that would have like talent shows. And I started out rapping about Jesus, essentially. So I would write these rap songs. Who you gonna call? Big J. Who you gonna call? Faithful He. You know, I still have a binder full of like Christian rap. And I was about 10 years old. And when I got to be about 12, I think, is when I started to like get kind of angsty and just kind of write my feelings about my parents and how they don't understand me or what happened at school with some child that I was trying to get to pay attention to me or something. And then I would share those with my family. I'd sit them down and say, I need to talk to you. I was very...
No, that didn't scare him at all, I'm sure.
I was a very weird kid, very deep and thoughtful about things. And so I'd organize these family meetings, which were essentially probably my first open mics, where I would read them my feelings, which is an interesting way to put that. But that's what I did. And then I get to college, and some friends of mine that I meet at college at Furman, they hear some of this stuff because I'm still sitting people down to listen to my feelings. It's funny to recount this. But I was sitting them down and they said, you know, there's this poetry event coming up that you should do. It's $100 if you win. And it was my first slam, but I didn't know what slam was. So I go research slam, watch Patricia Smith.
Yeah, well.
And I didn't know the magnitude of what I was witnessing to watch Patricia Smith at the time.
Yeah.
And Saul Williams, that was another one. And then I get up there, win the slam, and I'm like, I'm going to do this forever. This is my career now.
It only goes up from here.
Yeah. Which is not how that went.
No.
But that's how I would say I got into poetry. I would say I migrated to the page probably in 2017 or so is when I wanted to start getting it down into a book and something that might stay longer than me. Right.
Well, I could see that too. I mean, if very early influences are Patricia and Saul, I could totally see that. I mean, because that's the thing about back when slam was really starting to, you know, it had been around for a while, but it got real popular, you know, and you had Def Poetry Jam going on, you had My South stuff happening, and then I think Patricia came here to Columbia. Kwame had gotten her to come to Columbia. That was the first time I had met her. And she was, you know, she had a book out and didn't know much about her. When she got up and performed, I mean, like I was blown away. I was smitten. I was in love. like that was poetry. That was power. And then, you know, she'd been here a couple of times, you know, since then while Kwame was here, and she's such a kind soul. Yeah. But a good one. I mean, that's if you're getting rolling and that's your first sort of introduction to that, that's a high bar and really, really cool.
It is. I didn't think of it that way. That's why I said I didn't know the magnitude of what I was looking at. It was just like, this is really cool if I could do something like this. But it was always about that I don't know if this has something to do with growing up as a church-going person, but that kind of how do you move the people kind of thing. And I felt like their words had a way of like igniting something in me. So I really wanted to do that. I think the first poem I heard from Patricia Smith was, I think it's called 13, about being 13 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, what? how do you know this about me? And it's your poem, you know?
Yeah. Well, you pick up on the cadence, right? I mean, and I do think there's something to be said for that growing up in churches, you know? I mean, I unfortunately didn't go to a lot of, you know, non-denominational. I went to the whitest church you could possibly go to, the Southern Baptist Church.
Oh, it was very white.
They were?
Yeah,
Okay.
It was very white. I was the only one rapping in there.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, this one was something, man. Somebody could get up there, and there was some really talented musicians that went there and singers, and they would get up and do original pieces. I mean, beautiful pieces, and afterwards, nothing. It would just be dead silence, and then occasionally you'd hear some old man all the way in the back go, "Amen." You know, and that was it. You know, and I was always kind of blown by that, but I loved being able to pick up the cadence and to know what was coming next, right? Like you would hear it kind of ramp up, like, okay, about to be called a sinner here. Ramp up, ramp up, ramp up. Oh, yep, going to hell. And then things start to slow down. It's like, okay, invitational hymn. Mm-hmm. I'm reaching for the hymnal now. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, now he's picking it back up again. Damn it. You know, and I love that as a poet. Like I like being able to play around with my audience because I do think that that's a way to help them feel through something rather than think through something,
yes.
You know? Do you find that you're kind of working some of those same moves?
I think so. I think I would say that, and it could be that social worker part of me. I'm a social worker too. And so there's a part of me that's kind of trained to get somebody in their body more than in their head, while also myself being a Gemini who's constantly in my head, you know? So it's like, how can we communicate heart to heart?
Right.
And then get to the head after that. And I think the greatest poems for me, in my own, like what I'm drawn to aesthetically, they make me feel very deeply. Mm-hmm. And I almost can't describe what's happening inside of me, but they burst something. And that's what I'm trying to do, you know?
Right.
Where I think when I got started, I was trying to make people like be a different person, which is not my goal. I feel like I was a little mini preacher in a way. Like I was trying to change people's minds about something, which now it's like, I don't really care what you think, but if we can get on a vibration and stay there together somehow, I think that's going to transform something. And I'm really interested in that.
Yeah.
So I dig what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that comes out in your work.
Okay.
Because I think, you know, we both grew up in South Carolina, but our experiences are going to be totally different, right? And not just where we grew up, but how we grew up. Yeah. And yet, when I read your poems and when I hear you read your poems, it is an inviting space for me to come into and to feel it and to hear it and to understand it. But I feel like I'm invited to be there. And so they never come across that way at all. Like, I want to push something. I want you to understand where I'm coming from. And it is kind of got that matter-of-factness to it of, I don't really care what you think. I mean, you know, but I'm going to tell you about this one experience. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, that's the kind of relationship we want with poetry. You know, from the academic sense, from the academy, no, you know, there's meaning here and you must find that meaning. And if you can't find that meaning, well, you're dumb.
Yeah.
You know, and it's turned off a lot of people to poetry over the centuries and decades, whatever. I was asked this the other day about, you know, can you talk about the state of poetry today? And I'm like, it would be hard for me to say something like, there's never been more poetry written than there is today, because I don't know what poetry was written 40 years ago, 50 years ago, how much of that was written every day.
Right.
But there's more inclusion now today than there's ever been in poetry.
Absolutely.
And so I'm able to understand and empathize and feel and grow from that. So God, man, I wish more people would be reading poetry. You know?
I agree with you. I think this is going to sound probably terrible to say, but it makes me wonder about what's the amount of access we have to being more fully human right now.
Right.
By connecting with people and those differences in that way, compared to like my grandfather or my great-grandfather, who may have seen someone very different than them and just, you know, you kind of put that to the side. Mm-hmm. But if you're letting that perspective in, it's changing something about you and making you much more human.
Yeah. We'll be right back with more from Marlanda after this.
Hey y'all, Producer Drew here. If you're listening to this podcast, I bet you already understand how important arts and culture is to your community. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask you to consider becoming a member of the Columbia Museum of Art. Memberships do more than keep our doors open. They put art to work for our community, connecting visitors from all walks of life with unforgettable creative experiences that free our imaginations and bring us closer together. Your membership helps keep art accessible by supporting our free access days like First Thursdays. You'll help continue the mission of this museum by supporting educational programs for people of all ages, and you'll also help us continue to bring free programs like Binder Podcast to the public. Of course, you'll get plenty of perks as well, including discounts and pre-registration for camps and art classes, and unlimited free admission to the CMA and over 150 museums across the Southeast. By becoming a CMA member, you're not just benefiting yourself, you're uplifting the entire community. So join us in sustaining the art that sustains us all. Learn more about CMA membership on our website, columbiamuseum.org. And now, back to the show.
Nonlinear. My grandma Thelma taught me to wash my face, and my ma was my first English teacher. I knew how to read and write by age 3 because Grandma Thelma was forced to quit school. My ma fed me language like grits and called me a good, smart child. When I left, I did not have to be good. I only had to love what I love. When I was 8, I asked my ma why the world went black when I closed my eyes. Where did everything go? 2 weeks after I was born, Grandpa Mose told her, "Feed him and he'll grow. That's it." After college, we walked together on a bike path near my first bachelor apartment. Ma said it was a quick 4 hours away from her. If something happened, she could get to me. She said I was walking too slow. I was watching the wind pick hair from my Labrador's coat. I saw my mother and her feet next to mine, inflamed like her ma's. I was like a child when we got back to my apartment. She asked me to take off her shoes.
Drew and I were kind of walking and talking a little earlier, and one of the things that it reminded me of, how so many Americans think of history as a very linear thing, right? Yeah. And it's plots on a dateline. Mm-hmm. And what they ignore is that the fact that it's actually layers. It's a dig down. It's not a streak across. And when you do that, you start to see that there are multiple influences all converging in various places, some layered on top of each other. Sometimes they mix together. But inevitably, as something new is introduced, it fundamentally changes things so that nothing is truly settled, right? Like the moment it is settled, it's boring.
Yeah.
It's dead, but if it stays, it just keeps growing and growing, and to just take a slice of that, just to nick it down and be able to count the layers and see how all of these things unfold. That's where the poetry is, right? Yeah. I mean, when you were, when you're writing, because a lot of your poetry is about place, it is about home, it is about family. Do you think a lot about that in terms of how that is transpired in the world around you, whether it's art, whether it's what we're seeing in an ever-changing landscape, due to usually just gross overdevelopment, or as soon as somebody goes, "Ooh, South Carolina's got a nice coast, I want to live there," from Florida. Do you find that you're either responding sometimes to that, or do you find ways in which that comes into your work?
I think my work tends to try to tap into the past in a way that's connecting to the future, but in the same ground. So like if I'm looking at a piece of land or I'm standing on a piece of land, how can I get my body as close to the dirt of that space that it's remembering something and it's creating something else. So that it's a part of what you described, like that, those layers and the ever-changing cycles, but it goes back, forward, and deep. And when it comes to things that are happening to that space, whether it's the water, the coast, or development, which we see a lot of in Georgetown, where I'm from, I don't see myself responding to those things as much as I'm trying to tap in. Like, one of my favorite writers is C.A. Conrad, and C.A. Conrad will lay their body in the dirt and listen to it and make these recordings through, like, I don't know if they would call it automatic poetry, but kind of like transmissions. And I'm really interested in the spirit of the land and what it has to say more than what's trying to colonize it or take it over. Like, there's a poem I wrote that Emergence magazine picked up, and at the end, my granddad comes out of nowhere, and I swear it's out of nowhere, because I remember writing that poem and thinking, whose voice is this? And he says something like, I don't remember the poem exactly, but it's something like, the land will take over all them ting them people think they worshiping, and you not a thing begging to be seen, child. Be free. You were born free. And what it means to acknowledge the true essence of something regardless of what is happening to it. Right. And so I'm really interested in that, whatever that's called.
I don't know what it's called either, but that's badass. That's what I call it. I love that. I mean, because I think that is something that the present world seems to want to ignore, the spirit of the spirits of this place. I mean, I've been screaming it for years, like, guys, this whole place is haunted.
It's haunted.
I mean, it truly is. You'd be hard pressed to go into any place in South Carolina and not find a haunt. Yeah. But I love it. It's not a scary thing.
No.
It's and I love that idea of transmission, right? Because that is something that we've even talked about on this show, about the artist, about the poet, and how small the artist and the poet is compared to everything else that we're trying to do. Right. We're just a vehicle for the transmission. Yes. That is so cool. Let's talk a little bit about what you're doing here on this show, because that's kind of wild, man. I mean, it's got poetry, it's got music, it's got movement. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I had the opportunity. I've been invited in by you all, and I'm very grateful for that. You and Wilson, Bame. And I get the opportunity to work with Moses Andrews III, who is a musician of all sorts.
Yes.
I thought it was just piano. It is not.
Yeah.
It's many instruments, and I think vocals. Just a dynamic, multidimensional, creative person, not from this world. And Starlet Miller, who I am so excited to witness what they bring to a space through movement. Just the conversation and planning, I was like, oh, this is going to be very, very deep, and I'm very excited about it. But what we're doing is we've spent a lot of time with the images that are a part of this particular exhibition, and spending that time with those images along with some of my poems, we've come up with a improvisational kind of jazz, blues meets poetry and dance that I'm really excited about. Again, it's one of those things like, what do you call it? And it's like, it's three things, art, like converging.
That's what you call it.
Yeah. It's art converging. And this collaboration I'm really excited about. I think what makes me most excited is that we all have our work in other areas. So like Starlet's like an accountant, and Moses harvests rice, and I'm a social worker. I work with people and listen to their feelings and things like that. And we're gonna take a break for a second and just make some art on the stage. And I'm just really excited about that. Yeah. Grain memory. A wishbone branch falls from my grandma Thelma's oak for me. What do you know about magic? He asked. He bends the old body down, turns the wishbone branch into a cross, places it around my neck. I am strapped at the Black River's right shoulder, remembering my grandpa Mose never wore anything but church. My purple head begins to feel cold as clergy, parched. I ask for water. He gives me water and rice, says to repeat after him. I am fly from nature, nature fly. 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 Ah, I get it. It's an affirmation, I say. And he laughs in wind ocean songs. He whispers, do not be trapped by language. A voice begins to beat my chest, cavity in rhythm, chaff threshed from grain, separating me from need. I thought I'd snapped that wishbone branch myself. No, I am fly from nature, nature fly. At dusk, gleaming marigolds gathered beneath my feet singing, we were stolen. Shipped across the Atlantic. Invasive is a word I heard. Stolen. Thrash, thrash, thrash. And we speak in blue.
I think that's some of the best, most powerful art, honestly. When you can get artists together to collaborate, whether it's improv or it's completely planned out and choreographed and orchestrated, you know, you get such a rich, multi-dimensional effect in the end. And that's ultimately, and that was why when I had some initial conversations with Wilson, I naturally thought of you because you've done work similar to this. Yeah. And, you know, and that's very much what we're trying to do here, to get folks to think about art in different ways.
Yes.
You know, that it's not just something on the wall or in a pedestal that you can look at and you can read the history of it and, okay, now you know something and you move on, but that it's something that you can keep interacting with and take it in all kinds of different directions. And the fact that we've got three very different art mediums coming together and converging, as you said, but doing so in a way that is moved through the art. I mean, there's that vehicle, there's that transmission that's taking place. What's next for you? Like, what are you planning? What do you want to be when you grow up, Marlanda?
What do I want to be when I grow up? Well, the rap thing's not working out.
Yeah. That's a shame too.
So I'll be on a panel at Furious Flower. Furious Flower meets every 10 years at James Madison University. And I'll be joining Tyree Day, Dr. Ra Malika Imhotep, and Destiny Hemphill. So some North Carolina folks, some Atlanta folks, and digging into some of that spiritual dimension stuff I was talking about, and how it exists in Black poetics, especially Black poetics in the South. I can't say too much more about it because we haven't even met to talk about it. So I'd be getting ahead of myself. But that's coming up, and I'm really excited about. I just get really excited about working with other artists.
Yeah.
Because there's always something that they're bringing that I don't know. There's something they're feeling that I haven't felt yet.
That's true.
And I get the opportunity to not feel so strange in what I feel, quite honestly, or things that I think I'm seeing and I'm alone in seeing it kind of thing. Right. But I just want to make more poems that have to do with the magical place I come from, this rural place in the low country of South Carolina that made so much rice that the money from that funded a third of the nation's wealth. Yeah. Like, and these people then built their own communities. It's just wild when I think about it in the grand scheme of like what the United States of America is as an imperial project. So I'm really thinking about that and really curious about how I can see my granddad or my grandma as like this magical being, but not like magical Negro, but more like a being that's like, let me show you something about this cucumber. And I'm curious to know if you can hear what it's saying to me. Like, I'm really interested in that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Sounds really weird, but it's fun.
Yeah, but weird is fun.
Yeah,
and fun is good.
Yeah.
I mean, so, Marlanda, I tell you, I'm proud of you. I've seen you go. I mean, I remember it wasn't that long ago, and you were getting an award from SE Humanities.
Oh, yeah.
As I forgot what that thing was called, like New Voices or
Fresh Voices.
Fresh Voices.
Yeah.
That wasn't that long ago.
No.
And you're still a fresh voice.
I appreciate that.
And you're still doing awesome stuff and even more, I think things to come. But I'm also proud of the fact that, when I think about poetry and when I think about poetry in the state of South Carolina, how many just beautiful and rich voices we have of not poets who live in South Carolina, but of South Carolinians born and raised here, who happen to also be poets and are taking everything that we've been given, for better or for worse, and we're making art out of it so that others can see what it's like to live here, what it's like to be here, and just how strange and beautiful and unique we are to want to be here. To be in touch here.
Yeah.
I am glad to be your cousin.
I love that. I too am glad to be your cousin. There's something about South Carolina kindred, and I'll take it even beyond South Carolina and just say the South. And even folks that live in other places that have ancestors from this area. It's just fascinating to me. There's a connection that we all are thinking about. Like if I say cucumber, there's a memory that pops in for all of us.
Immediately, as soon as you said it, I was thinking about pepper and vinegar and, my mom cutting those things up. And I'm like, I ain't never eaten it. I ain't never eaten
so
that.
Good.
Oh, hell no. Good. Oh, man. But they'd eat it up like it was dessert.
It's great.
I was like,
yeah. And lick the fingers and everything.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I feel what you're saying. I appreciate your friendship. And I think that as we move forward, the more we can get folks to realize, like, I'm not living here because I'm trapped. Right. I love living here.
Yeah.
I love contributing here, and I love receiving here.
Yeah, absolutely. It took me a while for me to realize that.
Oh, likewise.
Right? We're growing up like I'm getting the hell out of South Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, I can't think of a place I'd want to live in more, honestly. There's some things I want to change for sure.
Absolutely.
But I think that would be everywhere, right?
That's right.
Your latest book, Thresh and Hold, comes from Hub City Press, which is a press I know very well, a damn fine press. Mm-hmm. And it's available really anywhere you buy books. There should be copies right here in Columbia at All Good Books, and if not, we'll make sure we fix that. But anywhere you buy books, you can pick up Thresh and Hold. And anything else you want to say to our listeners, Marlanda, before we let you go? I know you got rehearsals and stuff like that to do, so.
Just thank you so much for listening. I think every poet's like, thank you for reading. Thank you for listening. We appreciate it.
Amen. Thank you, Marlanda. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Ray.
Marlanda Dekine is a creative social worker and poet based in Georgetown, South Carolina. Her collection of poems, Thresh and Hold, won the 2021 New Southern Voices Poetry Prize. She is the creator of I Am From a Punch and a Kiss, a multimedia book/mixtape project, Soul and Ancestor Workshop, and Speaking Down Barriers. In this interview, you heard a clip from her performance at the opening celebration for Unsettled, the Landscape in American Art. A recording of the entire performance is available for free at the CMA YouTube channel or on our website at columbiamuseum.org. What stands out to me in Marlanda's work is something I think that is near and dear to not just myself as a poet, but to many Southerners, and that is our relationship to the land. It does not necessarily have to be the land that we were born into or the land of our ancestors, but the land that we occupy, the history of that space. There is not a linear projection of time. It is layers that we build on over and over and over again. And it does us a massive disservice to ignore that. The more we dig, the more we find, the more we learn about ourselves, the more we appreciate the very foundations that we're standing on and the foundations that were built on from that foundation. That is the true beauty of the land. It never goes away. It's always a part of us. All we got to do is dig.
You've been listening to Binder, a production of the Columbia Museum of Art. Today's episode was hosted by me, Ray McManus, produced and edited by Drew Barron, with special assistance from Joel Ryan Cook. For more information about CMA exhibitions and programs, visit our website at www.columbiamuseum.org.